Hey everybody, you're listening to What Are You Doing in Denmark, the podcast that helps you make Denmark make sense. My name is Derek Hartman, and I'm excited to bring you an excellent episode. We're joined around the table with our friend and yours, Brooke Black.
Hello.
And the hilarious Conrad Molden.
Hello.
And we are joined today with a special guest and friend of the podcast, Adrian Mackinder. He is an actor, comedian, improviser, author, and podcaster himself. And he's here to talk to us about some interesting and weird facts of Danish history. Welcome, Adrian.
Good day to you.
Welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thank you for asking me back. It's very nice to be back amongst this triptych of wonderful, talented humans.
Yeah,
Weird facts are my favorite, so I'm very excited.
Okay, great.
Very jazzed.
Yeah,
Okay.
we love the weird and we love the facts.
Well, I mean, we're halfway there.
Yeah.
So no verification, please.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no, we will not fact check any of these.
no, please don't. God
That's
knows
the best
the
kind of
internet,
facts.
for goodness sake. Yeah. But it's good to be here. No, thank you. I brought some things that I rummaged around that I think are a bit odd. And I think we can, I suppose I just throw them at you guys and then we discuss them, right?
Please,
Yeah, I love it.
And then we can see maybe if it says a lot about why Denmark is how it is today.
This is I feel like this is a loaded
No,
loaded
there's
setup.
nothing loaded. This is
Okay.
all, you know. So, I mean, shall I start?
Yeah,
Are we doing it? Right.
Please do.
I've gone old school.
I've got paper.
I've got
I've
paper.
got my papers.
Okay, right, here we go. This isn't the one I enjoyed. Given what I do for a living, what Conrad does for a living, and what have you. Apparently, Denmark had an official court jester until 1718.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes, there you go. Sound shocked.
I need to know the Danish name.
Well, you're not going to get it from me.
Adrian,
well, then
famously excellent Danish.
Yeah, my
linguist.
Danish is as good as my Nicaraguan. So, like Danish kings, it says like many European monarchs had court jesters. We know this whole thing. The fool goes back to the tradition of King Lear and what have you. But it's one of the last countries, apparently, to officially maintain one. I don't know how you officially maintain one. You'll give a house, a salary, the bells, I expect, and the little version of you on a stick. They used to have that, right?
Can you tax deduct the juggling balls?
I think so. I think it's capital gains tax, though. It depends how much they've gone up in value since you got them. But his name was
His name, just one. Just
well, this,
one guy.
no,
The
this
last
guy,
one.
the last
last
one. You know, they make a movie of this, and I guarantee at least 7 people will come and see it. It's called Klaus Pag or Paug, or this is strange. You think living here as long time as we have, you may have come across some Danish pronunciation or whatever, even if you don't know how to do it. You've seen the word. This is a word I've not seen before. So P-A-G-H.
Oh.
Right? Powell. But then Powell's like Powell, like P-A-W, that weird Danish name, Paul. Anyway, he was... This is the bit I think is very interesting and spills into Denmark. He was dismissed in 1718 by King Frederick IV, who apparently believed that he was funnier than the jester.
Fantastic.
And then the role
I
of
did
the
not
royal
see
fool.
that at the Domkirke in Roskilde when they're
Yeah.
talking about all the dead kings. It's like dismiss their jester because they were funnier.
Exactly.
Where do they bury the jesters? That's what I want to know.
I would like to see the
Well,
jester
you
graveyard.
just all the bells underneath. But yeah, so it gradually disappeared from the Danish monarchy and was phased out, rightly. But I think it's very interesting that the
That's
king
so
went.
mean.
Yeah, he went, I'm sick of all this lazy crowd work. You need to do finely crafted material. And you're not doing it, you know.
Which king was it?
Frederick IV.
Frederick IV. Got a number on him.
Exactly.
That's
So-
4.
Number 4.
But I do like the idea. He went, no, I'm better than this. I'm better than you at this. So you're out.
That's so cruel.
This must have been in
it's
the-
like the 100-year tradition, hundreds of years, and then it's like it ends here. It ends now.
There's something wonderfully poignant about this image of a guy in full jester gear sadly trudging home to tell his family, I got fired today.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on him, though. If you're the monarch's jester, then the feeling of like, okay, but I need something new tomorrow. And you're like,
Yeah, you got to keep up with
Quickly.
the times, keep up with like what the town crier is saying, like the topical news to be making the jokes about. I mean,
Absolutely, he's got to keep it topical. Otherwise, it's like I heard this, or he's just doing really lazy material about the last king or whatever.
Question.
or is it
Yeah.
still mostly a lot of like falling down and kind of pie in the face stuff? I don't know. Like, what is the humor of 17? Was it 18? 17, 18?
1718, so early 18th century. But I mean,
I'm curious to know what the material was
Yeah.
then.
Like, I don't feel like that was a particularly humorous time in history of
I think
humanity
it was a
or
wealthy
Denmark.
time for Denmark, right? Was
Maybe.
that the era of
Christian
like,
IV was like the peak, right? That was like late 16.
but Frederick IV, wasn't he the one that put a lot of money into the city and built a lot of things?
That was Christian.
Really?
Yeah.
I
This
thought
is
he
when it
built
gets
Marmor
silly.
Duke.
'Cause
One of
you
the fours,
They're
it was
either
Christian
called
before.
Christian or Frederick.
Yeah.
You just toss a coin and you've landed on the right name.
Yeah, which is hilarious.
I
That's
know.
why you're so fun. Yeah, I mean,
Maybe he did it. Maybe he said the wrong name, and that was it. The final straw. He went, so anyone here called Christian? And he's like, no, Frederick. You know this. You're out.
yeah.
And then he's gone. But anyway, that's that one.
I love it.
Here's another one. This is I like this. Copenhagen was rebuilt by a fire that didn't happen.
Wait.
There we go.
I have
Messing with your
issues
mind.
with fire safety in this country,
Yeah,
by the way, so please
I
continue.
agree. I
Okay,
feel
well,
like-
this might explain why. I'm interested to know what your issues are, though. But
I will tell you.
The obvious one.
so we're going back to this century again. In the 1700s, the city planned a major reconstruction based on the assumption that a great fire would eventually destroy it, which is so brilliant in contrast to, say, the Great Fire of London, where the Brits are wandering around clueless as usual, going, is that smoke coming from that baker's in Pudding Lane? And they go, nah, it's just an overcooked bun. And then the whole of London ignites, whereas the day's like, no, we have a plan in place just in case it happens. And then, ironically, in 1728, the city was almost completely destroyed by a massive blaze, the worst in Danish history, burning 28% of Copenhagen. But as they had plans, it was rebuilt surprisingly swiftly.
Oh.
So they had the prediction. They thought, well, in case.
Sounds a bit like an insurance scam, right? Oh no, these plans are coming to fruition.
Exactly.
Who
I need
started
to check
that?
out this insurance policy.
Yeah.
Clearly, they need to fix some of when Burson burnt down. So there's
too
that.
Too soon. It's not even a year.
No, but it's like
No, it's
they're-
almost a year.
But also, we bought a place in Copenhagen and almost set it on fire immediately on accident because
Too much Hugo.
some linseed oil rags spontaneously combusted under the kitchen sink.
What?
So you have a haunted apartment.
Yeah, well, no, it was my husband's fault, and he's usually very responsible. And
Okay.
he had but we were about to fall asleep, and we're like a few floors up, and he smelled smoke. And I'm glad we didn't go to sleep. We're like, it's nothing. It's like outside because there was a fire under our sink. And I was like, why didn't the
Whoa.
smoke detectors go off? And apparently, you don't require smoke detectors in any building that was built after 2004. Ours is from 1880, and I was like, don't you think that the older buildings would also need some smoke detectors? Like, why after 2004? And I think I was researching this and I think Denmark is one of the most lenient still when it comes to fire safety in Europe.
I don't think fire happens very often, judging by the general physical condition of the average Danish firefighter. I've seen as the cliche. I'm sorry, it's a generalisation, but
I'm sorry to firefighters.
They have like
sorry,
a
I'm sure you're
margarita and they're like
listening
hanging
to
out.
but what I'm saying is, we have the whole thing of the firefighters at calendar in like
That's
the
true.
big buff fire guys, and I remember just seeing some guys who maybe have had a little bit too many pastries just sitting around because maybe they haven't been called out in a while, so they're like they're sitting there with dust over the phone. It's an old rotary phone, and they go, "Hi." Oh, no! And they have to go and get them going after the fire with some buckets.
But also still lighting real candles on the Christmas tree.
That's a big one. And
That's
not to
upsetting.
mention,
And in Sweden, like they've in other countries that have done this, they've now switched to electric lights. But I think like quite a few Danes still. I mean, our family does. Like,
So mine moved into the electric.
they gave me
age.
the job of like lighting them, and I was like, well, and they just hang on the branch. They don't like get fastened on. It's just like by a weight.
Seriously?
Like, it's just okay.
I don't understand because
But people like say they like. And I'm sorry to like interrupt you.
it's fine.
Again, I'm very fired up about this topic.
Oh.
But you're supposed to keep like a bucket of water near the tree, which we did not also do. I just really want to set my house on fire.
we're supposed to keep the tree like really hydrated as well.
Well, and it's because you usually bring the tree in like a few days in
Yeah.
like before Christmas, so it's still fresh, so it's not like dried out. Like
Yeah.
we bring it in like November. Like, you know.
So
yeah,
you
no,
can
we do that. It's tinder
It's like-
dry,
yeah,
skeletal
exactly.
form in the
But
corner of the room.
I digress, but still. you
No,
were
no, but
saying.
I think it's a very good point because all countries that had the Bavarian Christmas tree tradition used to have the candles on.
Yeah,
You know,
and
that
I
was very
think
much a
it
statement
is
of
so
trend.
lovely
It is,
for
it is.
like those, it was like I think we opened gifts while it was still lit, and it was so I was like, this is fantastic, but I'm like a little nervous the whole time.
As you sat there in your silver foil blanket, watching the inner glow of your apartment rise up into the night sky, you thought, God bless us, everyone.
It truly is the most dangerous time. It's the most dangerous week of the year for fire safety because we go from lighting candles on a dry
Oh,
Christmas
yeah.
tree to
Yeah,
New Year's, which we know starts on the 29th and ends
Yeah.
on like January 2nd, where we're just in a perpetual state of drunkenness and explosives and candles.
That took me by surprise because, again, the fireworks in the UK is always it's there for New Year, but it's always been a much more which is ironic because you think this might be more Danish. They're very un-Danish about the fireworks thing because in the UK it's very communal and it's organised and you go to a fireworks display.
Same.
Same with
In the US as
Okay,
well.
so it's the same. So you would go somewhere and someone has sorted it out.
Like
and
Joe
put it on.
security is there, and so
Yeah,
you feel
exactly.
like there's some level of protection.
Unless you're my mum, because she used to buy boxes of fireworks and we would do it in our garden. And there was one time where she lit it and the rockets went up and we had a cherry tree in our garden and it hit the branches and they started going through our French doors into the kitchen.
No.
And my mum I remember her grabbing me and pulling me into a corner of the garden and covering my eyes. And so just exploding in our kitchen.
But I remember those commercials, those sort of infomercials when I was a kid about, and they were always that phase in the sort of the 80s where it was built on fear and horror.
Yeah.
It was about returning to a firework when it's been lit, and it would just cut to some girl going, ah!
Yeah.
And you go, I'm not doing that. But then there was the phase of the indoor fireworks. I don't know if you guys had that.
No.
Oh, God, it was rubbish.
That sounds like it shouldn't be a
No,
thing.
but it's so underwhelming because they have to adhere to these very strict safety rules. So I remember there was just a tray with small things that looked like fireworks, and you lit them, and they go, and then you just got this what looks like a sort of an ossified cat turd.
Oh, I know what
sitting
you're.
on the-
I know
on the-
exactly
on the-
what you're
on the
talking
desk.
about.
And I remember even as a kid being momentously underwhelmed.
Yeah, I remember
those.
those.
You know that.
Yeah,
They
they
were the
just sort of
sparkler
like.
watching a series of, they look like they're sort of, fecal remains excavated from Pompeii.
That's exactly what they look like.
That actually now rings a bell.
It's like a
You
charcoal.
probably blocked it out because it was such a horrible. Anyway, look, we're getting bogged down.
That's
in
true.
fire,
We are-
but I'm
we are
really sorry,
focused
but
on the
we've had
wrong-
this experience.
Well, it's our own fault, so
Yeah.
we've learned.
Well,
That's
if
the
only they
danger.
could adhere to some of the early 18th century version. I like this one. Hans Christian Andersen was a paranoid sleeper. So he had a fear of being buried alive, which was actually a very common thing during the Victorian age. That you will hear tales of, there were the bells on pieces of rope that would go down underground into. So if you were buried alive, if you were misdiagnosed as being, say you're in a coma and you think, well, they're dead, bury them, where you could ring a bell. So I'm not dead. So this was this was a very real thing. So he was absolutely paranoid. So he had he kept a handwritten note by his bed that read, "I'm only sleeping."
Oh,
I think it was the
wow.
inspiration for the Beatles.
was
song.
he a heavy sleeper?
I don't know.
Because I don't think I would ever think. I don't think I would be that paranoid.
You got to be deep asleep if someone drags you out of your bed,
right?
I have such
diagnoses
problems.
you as dead, and then puts you in a coffin.
But they didn't know. They're like, we'll look for someone. What do they do? Hold a mirror up and they go, well, I don't know, maybe they didn't have a mirror. I mean, we take for granted, we like to think we can tell if someone is alive and sleeping or dead. But
I'm pretty
obviously
good at
those-
that.
Maybe they go, well, it's
So it's
time.
on my CV.
Yeah.
Skills I have.
I can tell if you're alive or
I
sleeping.
know if you're alive
Yes,
or not.
basic French
It's one of my
literature.
favorite games.
It must have been hard when he did actually die, though, because there must have been a lot of pressure on the coroner. Like, is Hans dead?
Right.
Yes,
You've got to
exactly.
be sure.
It's the most elaborate boy who cried wolf, isn't it?
Like, check for a note. He might just be sleeping.
But not only that, this is a good one. Actually, everything comes back to what you were saying. He also reportedly carried a rope with him when traveling in case he needed to escape a burning building.
By hanging himself?
No.
Oh.
Well, wow, you went there? I mean, he was a depressed man.
He
but
was,
still.
and I'm like really. The more I find out about him, it's such like a sensitive, sad story.
I think he was. Well, he was also. I mean, that's a very nice word, but he was also a sponger that basically wandered around just couch surfing and annoyed everyone.
That's right. There was like a woman's house he stayed at for like 2 months or
Exactly.
something,
And I
and
think-
then he's like, "I love you," and she's like, "No."
Yeah, this is too much too soon. Well, I've been there for 7 years. But I think also he reportedly Kierkegaard found him depressing. Which says all you need to know about Hans Christian Andersen as a human being. If Kierkegaard's going, well, he really brought me down. I'm going to go back to my writing of existential angst.
He's like, "I've made you a lovely paper cutout. Can I stay a little bit longer?"
It's like, no, you must wander around and look wistfully up at Tivoli, and we'll capture that in a statue many years later.
A lot of his stories are rather. They're not. I wouldn't say they're very uplifting. The Disney versions have given them a redemption. But
Well, I learned something relatively recently from listening to a podcast about folklore, which apparently after the war, the Allies, they tried to clamp down on a lot of his stories, like him and the Brothers Grimm stories, because they thought that a lot of his stories were sublimating far-right ideology.
Wow.
To the extent they were like, we're not comfortable about this. Because ultimately it's all about conforming. So rather than being proud of your difference, the ugly duckling becomes a beautiful swan. Whereas the real story
Little Mermaid
should be,
becomes air.
yeah, right? It's like the real story should be, no, you don't conform to the majority here. you should be proud that
You marry a
are
prince.
ugly duckling. Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of that going on.
So much better.
Lucky you weren't his editor.
He wouldn't have had the career.
I've got an alternate ending for you.
Yes, how about that she just happily stays in the sea forever and then laughs as it burns down because they hadn't put plans in place? Anyway,
She
that's
strikes
that
her last
That
match
is
and it
fascinating.
warms her till spring. The end.
What the hell?
There was an ugly duckling who was just chased
And
out
then
of
he'll just be a
town.
footnote in history. Oh, there's also this
Exactly.
guy who wrote these books that nothing really happened.
Yeah, this horrible tale of a duckling that wreaked revenge on the community.
With the little match girl.
Yeah, exactly. She was flammable.
Meanwhile, swans are terrifying.
Swans are
awful.
I mean, they're giant when they get out of the water,
Yeah.
and then they will come after you and hiss
I
at
have
you. And
never
I learned
been-
that when I moved here. I was like, "Oh, a swan, beautiful." And it's like,
There's always
okay.
that story about how they can break your arm.
Yes, yes.
Which I find a very odd little bit of anecdote. It's like, well, how did they try this? It's like, what if you're on a plane traveling with a swan and you just jostling for space? If you're on a budget airline and it just breaks your arm, you have to, why is the swan on the plane in the first place?
I have not heard that.
Well, that it can break your arm.
No, I've heard that many
I see.
times. I have
About-
lots of.
it's a more-
trying to
it's a-
figure out the scenario. Also,
What, when
It's
you'd be on a
like-
plane next to a swan?
For an emotional support.
Yeah, an emotional.
swan.
If you,
Yeah.
exactly.
They are not the emotional support most people need, but if you're that one,
It's more like a bodyguard. Actually,
Terrifying.
definitely
You could
that.
get an emotional support swan.
If you got them on your side, but they will turn on you.
Like I have no problem with ugly ducklings. I've never been attacked by one, but swans will like drown your go boat and steal your bread. They are
Which was apparently the first draft of the Ugly Duckling. This is why the go boat is a celebrated Danish tradition.
fair.
The boaty.
Yes. Okay. Then we have the king who thought it was made of glass. This is great. So King Christian the Seventh he had, I suppose, in modern day parlance, he had mental health issues. Unfortunately, when you put someone in great power who has mental health issues, you get what we have now in America.
Yes,
but aside
truly.
from, but seriously, but he exhibited erratic behavior throughout his time, including rumors that he bit people and was a cannibal. But he wasn't.
He wasn't though.
He wasn't.
Did he? But he did bite people, but he wasn't
probably bit
accountable.
Someone one. Well, I mean that's a stretch, right?
Yeah.
From having a nibble to actually just chewing down on a leg, and I think that is
To eat for food because he probably has enough food.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
There's one part of a Malian ball where the two buildings are connected with an archway, but it's actually a hidden walkway. And the idea was that it was because to transport him so he didn't have to leave the building.
Really?
Yeah, because his schizophrenia and his Tourette's was so severe that if he was seen in public.
What a great fact.
Yeah.
That's great.
So the top of the archway is actually a narrow corridor to
It's
connect
for
the two
Christian the
buildings.
Seventh.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
is he the one who? I believe like his stepmother, or I feel like other people were basically in power, but just that's what they were doing, keeping him hidden.
Well,
so-
no, we get to this actually. It's very interesting you raised that because it said he also believed he was made of glass and could
It's
shatter
very
if he was
delicate.
touched,
Oh.
which is quite sad, really,
Like Derek on a Monday
That's
morning
like a
after a
sensory
busy
thing.
weekend.
That
That's
is
a modern
true.
day sensory thing.
isn't it? Really? Yeah,
I mean, yeah, like it's a sensory issue thing. Like,
Yeah.
like people don't want to be touched, or people like if you think you're made of glass, it's got to be because like you think like
And often people that exist within the spectrum will often have sensory
yeah,
Oh,
issues
that's
and what
true.
have you.
yeah.
So I think that's
Oh,
probably
that's
yet
rough.
another thing we can add to the list of things he had. But his erratic behaviour led to his doctor, Johann Struensee. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Apparently, he took control of the government before he was
Yes, I read about
but he was
this.
executed because he had an affair with the Queen.
Yes, I did
okay.
hear about this.
Anna Maria told us about this when she was here for the episode about the royals.
Yes.
God, for that this is the first fact that's been corroborated. Quick, give me a
Yes.
pen.
Great. We'll link that in the show notes and description. She
Oh my
told us a
God.
lot about
She was
some
so
of these
great.
more eccentric royals, and that one of the queens had an affair with the king's doctor.
And they do talk about that at the Domkirke in Roskilde. I remember that as well, like on their little like this person had this life. It's like, oh, juicy.
This life.
It doesn't. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I guess it's gone down in history because there were so many issues attached to him. But there's often, certainly with the British royal family, they often throw the thing that it's, this is what happens when you inbreed families for many years, which is such a narrow, reductive view of looking at how mental health affects. But it certainly doesn't help those situations because they've always said that about, the fact that, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh were cousins in the UK and everything. And the family tree was more of a stump, but here we are.
Well, he also didn't have a jester.
Maybe
Right?
things
Did
would be
was this
different.
after? Yeah.
He needed a distraction.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we are. The world's first female Santa started in Denmark. I like that one.
Oh.
What did I want to ask what they called her, but you probably won't tell me.
Nisipi.
Oh.
So elf lady, elf girl.
Elf girl. You know, we called her Galadriel.
Yeah.
So that was before the Christmas traditions in this country solidified, because we talked about that when we did that episode of the Christmas traditions.
Yes, we'll link that one as well.
There we go. Yeah. About how these traditions were sort of variations on a theme throughout most of Northern European countries and what have you. But this was one that hadn't sort of crystallized, sadly, by the patriarchy. So it was a female version of Santa's elves.
That's really
When was that?
I haven't got a date on this, but I'm guessing before Christmas tradition solidified, that could be any time leading up to the late 19th century, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But it was a uniquely Danish spin on the figure of Père Noël.
Yeah, because my family's from Italy, and they have La Befana as the Christmas witch, and she's just like not meant to be like she's supposed to be a helper, and she's just like cleaning a house, and then she goes on her broom and like helps deliver presents. It's not like she's like a creepy witch that's going to curse you, but like it has the connotation.
But I think that's very interesting, because the Christmas tradition is often historically connected to something a bit more dark and macabre, having a witch figure.
Well, also, if you're bad, you get like an onion or a piece of coal in your shoes.
And then in Germany, you've got Krampus.
Right,
Krampus
which I really want to see in real life one day. Oh my God.
It's fantastic,
Oh,
isn't
I
it?
really want to go to Krampus.
Yeah.
And they have like all the kind of now, like February, March, like there's all the kind of scary like spirits in the mountains in Europe as well that I really want to see in these little towns. I think they're going to like light a snowman on fire in Switzerland soon it's all just like spook winter away.
Yeah, absolutely. And also because it was considered traditionally as a liminal space, because it's tied around the winter solstice. So we're in about the 21st
all this
of December.
pagan stuff is like actually close to like nature, and some of it's going away. Like I think there was a survey that like Halloween is way more popular than Festival now, and only 4 years ago it was the other way. So
but
it's
Halloween is originally from the Celtic.
Samhain.
Samhain. So it really is pagan.
So, yeah, that's true.
I mean, or
but
I
so
know that
commercial
that's
now.
not the right word.
I
but
mean-
it's,
Well, I mean, it is. It is a
Okay.
paganized thing, because it was all Halloween was actually, and then it was adopted by Christianity. It's actually used to be like Easter of a 3-day festival.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
There's,
right.
there's All
Hallows
Eve, then there's All
then
Souls
All
Day and All Saints Day.
Right.
And they're the three. And I think it's very interesting. But the pagan roots run very deep, particularly in Northern Europe. And I think it's interesting that they had these traditions. And I think it is a shame that some of them have got lost, because it is about connecting back to nature and the land. Because that was what it was all about. Everyone's lives rotated around
I want
the
my wheat
harvest
bun.
and things like
I want
that.
my Lent bun.
it's not just selling candy and.
No. But even that, you'll find traditions in that. There's one tradition about St. Nicholas, which was, one of the things was patron saint of fallen women and the poor. So it was a case of apparently when they'd hang out their stockings from the windows to dry, then, so the legend goes, he put fruit and provisions, maybe even money in the socks to give them a little bit of a sort of a leg up, so to speak, which is why we still have that, that chocolate money that goes in, or putting a satsuma in the toe of the stocking. And I think so there is a thread that goes back to these things. Anyway, that's more of that in the Christmas edition.
Girl.
This isn't a fact, but I like it. Was this idea for a while that Denmark banned Marmite? Because I think it opens up a wider conversation.
They banned it.
Yeah, well, it made international headlines. This was as recently as 2011 that Marmite had been banned, and then the Danish Food Authority just came out saying, no, we haven't banned it. All we're saying is it has certain.
We just don't like it.
Well, I don't like it, and I'm British. But then they always say it's Marmitey. You either like it or you hate it. And to the extent that it has in British English, it's become like a verb. It's a bit Marmitey. Because everyone knows you either like it or you hate
polarizing,
it. There's nothing in the middle. But yes, so in Denmark's strict food laws, which open. No, don't start.
Before Noodlegate, we had Marmite.
But it means that certain fortified foods, certain additional things are not allowed here for some baffling reason when they are in other countries, which is why in our
like Elf on
country-
a Shelf cereal.
Yes, exactly.
That's what my mom always sends like a package to the kids, and it's always got all this banned stuff. It's like Red 40, Lake, Blue Lake.
I think the U.S. banned Red 40 now too. So that's good.
And all that heroin you brought back.
Well,
But the yeast was the thing, apparently. It contained some vitamins that weren't officially approved. But it made officially heads on where Marmite is a national staple, and apparently some Danish experts tried to smuggle it in or make two alternatives. But then they said it was never banned, it was just misinformation. It was just we just didn't stock it. But then when that opens up a whole can of worms about Danish supermarkets, and I don't want to get into that.
But I do love. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I've never seen it for sale. Maybe if you go to Menu
has it.
Maybe in a corner
They have their little American/British food corner. In
It's
it.
weird that it's under colonial, which is like, I'm like, I know that it means like canned, I think,
Yeah,
but
but
I'm like,
it's
okay,
triggering,
the
isn't it?
colonial foods.
Can't be. I often go to Manu in a red coat and buy it, just to remind people that it's British. I don't.
No, but one
insane.
of my favorite things I learned recently about the banned ingredients. So Denmark asked for one banned ingredient to be pushed through here, and it's the red dye that they use on the boiled hot dogs because it's so beloved that we need to have the really red hot dog.
Well, that's interesting though, isn't it? Because that just shows how it just the goalposts move and they go. If it suits us, we'll rush this through and bypass the bureaucracy.
There were some. There was a case where I think some pastries that had too much cinnamon.
Oh yeah,
Were,
too much cinnamon.
Too much cinnamon, but it was due to an EU regulation.
yeah, it's due to too much of any spice or like that was the Korean noodle thing. Like it's not just that it's cinnamon. And
So I think like Denmark and Sweden were able to appeal it under the grounds that these were foods of national importance. So they were able to say, no, we need to have
sausage of national importance.
Yeah, we need to have
someone at the back. So you do know that Danish pastries are an Austrian invention by Viennese bakers. They went, shut up. We don't want to hear this now. We're trying to make a case. But anyway, wasn't banned.
Yeah.
So it's not a history. But this is the last one I have.
That's a relief.
This country once had a pirate king.
This country.
Yeah.
The one we're in now?
We're in now. This country. Yes. So Eric of Pomerania.
Okay.
Who
Did
reigned
he have a little dog?
I know. He's a tiny Pomeranian. Reigned from 1396 to 1439.
I really want him to be a pirate dog. I'm sorry.
With an eye patch.
Little wooden
peg leg.
he ruled Denmark, Norway, and Sweden back when it was. But it was interesting because Pomerania was a pejorative word. It was deliberately just because they wanted him to remember that he wasn't popular because he wasn't from Denmark or Sweden or Norway. He was actually from what is now Poland.
Yeah, I was going to say across the Baltic.
Yeah.
Like Dansk, right?
And he was actually eventually deposed in a coup.
Deposed.
Because his so
like
he was a
terminated?
relative.
Like,
Am I right in this? He was a relative of Margareta I. Is that correct?
I think so.
So she kind of claimed rule through his claim to the Danish throne.
Yeah, that
Is
rings true
accurate?
from what.
Or am I thinking of a
basically
different
read.
Eric?
No,
Or a different Pomeranian?
I'm thinking of Eric the Viking. But he obviously wasn't too violent because he wasn't killed in the coup, and this is the whole point. So rather than disappear, retire quietly, he went to now a Swedish island of Gotland. And he retired there to become a pirate, attacking ships.
he became a pirate later.
Exactly. It's it's just many people have more than one career these days.
Oh.
Any kind of retirement plan.
He trudges home. He goes past the dejected jester. He goes, what are you going to do now? Because I don't know. It's just like AI taking people's jobs. Because I don't know what I'm going to do. My only life has been to make people laugh. Because how do you think I feel? I ruled the place. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I hear there's money in piracy.
Yeah.
And he goes, do you want to join? He goes, no, I just need to rethink my life. So he went home, and then Eric, the pirate, comes along, and he was attacking the trade route in the Baltic Sea.
Dang.
Wow.
He raided trade routes. And I love it when you do historical research. Sometimes it's like, this is half-assed, and sometimes it's a bit more thorough. And I read one source that said, before disappearing from history. And I go, was that the end of it, was it? and then I looked at another source and they go, oh, no, he died in 1459 in Dowalo Castle and buried in the Church of St. Mary's at Dowalo in Pomerania. So he went back home. But I love this first go, he just disappeared from history. We don't know what happened to him. So, we do. He's there. He's buried. You fool.
Next to Jack Sparrow.
Yeah. So there we go. But he did live out the last bit of his life. And I like the idea that, you get deposed from being, king, and I'm going to become a pirate, and just start attacking ships pointlessly.
That line about disappearing from history. I went to the National History Museum in Montreal, Canada, and they just during the Native American takeover part, they're like, no one knows what happened to the Iroquois. They just disappeared one day.
Oh, wow.
And this was years ago, and I hope they've fixed it since. But we were like, what?
Yeah, wait a minute.
That's convenient.
How are they able to do that?
No one knows what happened. We just they're all under the
Somebody
ground.
knows.
Exactly.
Unreal.
It's like the Pilgrim Fathers landing on Plymouth Rock, and they all just ran off happily. And let us go to the land. It was really easy. We put down roots, and they were fine with it. Yeah.
But it is scary. Like, I mean, I know this is lighthearted, but like disappearing things from history is a topic right now. And that is like it's
true.
like what the people that grow up in the world. If you don't know about something happening, then like how do you? That's where it all starts.
Well,
right?
there's a famous quote that's been attributed to so many people, which is history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Yep.
So whoever's won, they get to write the history. So of course you get like the propaganda. The whole idea that Napoleon was small is a complete myth. Even though we get down to the Napoleon
British
because
propaganda.
the British propaganda, because we need to undermine this guy, so the British
Really?
press.
That was-
But he was actually of average height.
He was average height, but they wanted to make like that he was a diminutive guy. He was like, so, but it's so embedded in our
That's
culture.
so funny
we have
because
the
it's like the
Napoleon
root of so
complex.
many jokes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Napoleon complex.
Yeah, and he
exactly.
wasn't small at all. But these are all everything. The power of the press. I mean, they did that sadly during the the Irish potato famine and the demonisation of the Irish by the English. The British press started to draw them to look like monkeys. These were the Irish, to try and make them seem like they were subhuman. It's the classic thing, like, and again, we just got heavy very quickly, so I'll bring it back. But you can see in, the press, the power of the press, particularly if it's in cahoots with the government, to manipulate the general public into thinking something that's objectively not true. And of course, we're in danger of seeing this so much in the US right now. Whatever if they see selecting which press are going to cover what they're doing, you're not going to get a truthful account of everything, and it's just very sad.
To bring it back to Denmark, it's like Vikings were not necessarily blonde. Like there was that. I think it was DR or one of the main papers a few years ago. Like that article came out, and it was like they more likely were from other countries and had dark hair.
Well,
and
exactly that. I mentioned
and they
that
rebranded
recently.
somewhere in like the 1800s, I think.
Absolutely. I mentioned that on stage recently. I do a whole bit about how Lego isn't Danish.
Right, it's British.
And then it's like, they've discovered now that basically being a Viking was more like being a mercenary. So it was a profession.
Right.
So you could be from any country in the world and be a Viking.
Yeah.
So, so that idea
It is
of
funny
it being
how they were
national-
like, we got to make them blonde. Like, it's like
We're going to make them the Aryan master race. Do you want to use those words? Maybe not, no. But it is an interesting thing that, so we could all be Vikings. You just turn up. It's being a gun for hire. You want to go on a raid? Sure. Where are you from? Wisconsin. You're in.
It also can happen in almost the reverse, right? The whole thing with the horns on the Viking hats, we all know came through Italian opera many centuries later.
we all know. I did not know.
No.
Yeah, they
So
they
that
did
was
not have
added-
horns on
My
their
very
hats.
first history lesson in secondary school was about that. It was a really good way the teacher could point out, the one of the important things, vital thing you do as a historian is to assert, the facts, the truth from the propaganda. When he said, think about it, use your common sense. Of course, there were no horns on it because you go into battle. How easy is that to knock off with a sword?
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
of course, they didn't have it. They may have had, as you said, a ceremonial thing that they may have then absorbed into opera. But it's like it makes no sense to have horns on a helmet.
Wow.
But they would drink a horn and drink out of a horn.
Right.
And so I think that's where the imagery just sort of got.
But horns from where? Like,
Well, there was a fact.
What animal?
There's a fact I didn't put in here, which actually ties into this, which is everything we just talked about how people are projecting a non-honest view of maybe an oppressive race or something, or they perpetuated the stereotype because it made them more scary and intimidating, which was this idea that Vikings drank from skulls.
oh, right.
That whole thing, and it's like, well, they probably
But skull is
didn't.
bowl.
A skull is a bowl, and
My
it's
husband
bone,
gave me
horn.
so much shit for that. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know why Vikings drink from skulls? He's like, nope.
Yeah, but they now think, well, no, not really. But you can see it all meshed together because, a horn is essentially, it's not, it's fibrous tissue, isn't it? But, they go, it's a bone. So they go,
But
well,
where
they
do you get that
extrapolate
horn
out.
from? Like, what animal? Because there's like, elk and thing. I'm trying to think of animals that are like in Scandinavia, and you don't like. Where do you get a big drinking horn from?
It's
A cow, maybe?
It's
A swan.
Swan. Yeah, but you try and wrestle that off a swan,
Yeah.
you lose an arm on a plane or otherwise.
All I'm thinking is like a rhinoceros. Like, I
A
don't know
walrus.
But they do continue because if you go to Copenhagen
That's-
now, you can buy horns to drink your Carlsberg out of while you're
Oh my
watching
God! I
Metallica,
saw a guy with a Viking helmet and 2 like rhubarb sandwiches like poke through the
Yeah.
horns to save for later. It was amazing.
Yeah,
People are
that's
that
a
festival's
good
incredible.
use of it.
Yes.
No,
If you know where the horns were from, please comment or
yeah.
email
I mean,
us
please.
and let
like,
us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know. So, because I will be at Copenhagen this year, and I will buy.
Are you going?
I go every year.
I have to go again. Oh my God, it was so good.
I'd say it's a lot of fun. I go every year. I have like 7 or 8 friends that fly over from the UK for it. There's like 8 of us.
Everyone is so nice to each other.
I know.
They're so kind.
That's the
and
secret
it's like
of metal.
Yeah,
I know. Metal is
they're
one
all
of
like
the nicest
sweethearts.
genres. Metal fans are so like, hello.
I didn't
you're
know
right.
until I dated a metal guy, and he's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go on the roller coaster with you. But I'm a gentle soul, and we could talk forever.
Exactly. There's a fine line between metal and basically LARPing and D&D. We're just
Totally.
fantasy geeks, basically.
Totally.
So that's why they sing about it, you know.
Oh,
Led
I
Zeppelin
love
sang
it.
about Lord of the Rings stuff way back then.
Yes,
The Battle of Evermore.
that's true.
You know,
That
it's all
is
in
true.
there. We've laid the seed to show we're not scary people.
You guys need to come to Copenhagen
Maybe
for the atmosphere.
for the atmosphere.
Yeah, for the
For
atmosphere.
the sandwiches on the Viking.
For the horns.
Yeah, the horns. But anyway, so that was my rounded up. Have I got a third? But no, that's not me. That was an invoice for someone else. That's an invoice.
Literally
for my
brought his
wife's
papers
shop.
with
him.
Keep
Here.
that. They might need that. There's nothing to do with here. But there we go. So that was some random facts that have been kind of either debunked or sewn into the fabric of Danish culture. Because I think we can see something in a little bit of them as we keep on talking about it.
I think,
Yeah.
Did the lady elf go away? Like, because I mean, clearly not really popular now. But like, did it
was
say
probably
anywhere?
phased
Disappeared from history.
Exactly.
She has evolved into the Yule AP.
Oh my God!
That's
Do they still do those?
They definitely still do.
I
those.
keep looking and I can't find.
What
It's
is that?
It's like a shot girl.
Yeah.
Oh,
on
the-
J Day they
oh,
have
with
the
the
furry.
bandolier of
Oh,
shots.
right.
They have a low cut top and fur around it, and they walk around with trays of shots.
Well, I was going to wear that today.
How is that different than like not beer fest? What do you call it?
Oh, like
Oktoberfest.
Oktoberfest, yeah.
Just
They
think
drink
of
out
the
of horns in that too.
Ah.
Or have I made that up?
I think you,
No, you're right. I
Okay.
think so. No, I don't
in
know.
Munich? I don't think so.
No, that's
No, I
true.
don't know. Backtracking.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Well, Adrian, thanks for this wonderful history lesson, all these weird little quips. And I know you can tell us where we can get more history podcasting
Oh, my
from
thing.
you. Yeah,
Well,
please tell us.
I do a comedy spoof history podcast called History for You with Douglas and Hugh, which was as much poking fun at those kind of smug middle class men who think they know so much about history. So we take a subject and we just we go off on surreal flights of fancy about it, and then we also have our little backstory of our little characters that we play. But they're these ridiculous little men who think they're so important. Anyway, so that's called History for You with Douglas and you, and we take a thing, and it's so it's rooted in fact, but then it goes off very quickly. But yeah, so I do that podcast. That's there. So yes, and also I've written my most recent book, Death and the Victorians. Yes, that's out now. There it is. Look at that.
And it's really, really good.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Conrad.
I
great
promise you,
art.
it's a great read. I used to teach British history at Aarhus University, and we had a lesson on the Victorians. So I wasn't really into the Victorians until I started teaching it. I found it interesting, but this book is really, really good deep dive. And even if you're not into history, if you're not into Victorians, I really, really recommend it.
Well, that's
really
very
good
kind
fun.
of you. Thank you. That was my aim. The whole point is you don't have to be into history of Victorians. It's the premise is that all our modern day obsessions on the dark side of things, so from true crime to serial killers to grisly murder to the occult to the supernatural to belief in ghosts, spiritualism, all those things were given to us, popularized for the first time by the Victorian age. And that's what the book's about. So if you have the reason you're listening to a true crime podcast or watching a drama series about a murderer or any kind of ghost haunted house thing, that's the Victorians that basically did that.
Oh yeah.
But the best thing about the book is your voice on it. That's the
Oh,
most
I
fun
bet.
thing. It's all of that
Yeah.
wrapped into a really humorous package.
Oh, this art on the back is good too. Crime?
Yes. The
Crime.
nemesis of neglect. That was during the Whitechapel murders, the Jack the Ripper murders. That was in the press. There was again using the press to point out it was a satire on how the system had failed all these poor, unfortunate women that were getting killed. That was the angle. That's just one thing of it. Talking of that, my voice, only a couple of weeks ago, the audiobook version is now available.
Okay.
So you can listen to me. If you can't be bothered to read it, which is fine, I will read it to you.
But you have such a nice voice that I'm usually, it really depends on an audiobook for me. Like the voice is a big thing
Right.
for me. So it has to be, usually it's like an actor or a musician that's like reading it themselves. And so I feel like when you practiced a little bit earlier, I was like, I would listen.
I'll do the whole thing like that.
Plus the topic is really on brand for me. So.
But,
So you have your podcast, or you'll come to our house and read your book to us.
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll just phone
By
you up.
candlelight on the Christmas tree.
Yeah, if you can't sleep, I should do some ASMR podcast, just reading a chapter.
That's great.
But if you do fall
Tuesdays and
asleep, keep a
Thursdays are
note
good for
next
me.
Yeah, put a note. Exactly.
Put a note next to I'm not
Oh,
dead.
I'm not dead. Adrian just read me.
Yeah, I'm not
that's
dead.
right.
Adrian read me to sleep, and this rope is in case the house burns down, which it will do because of Danish fire safety is wanting.
Amazing. Excellent. Well, I don't think we need a jester because we had you here too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
us.
reductive. Minstrel in the corner. No, I understand. Thank you. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
well,
for the time. I
thank
enjoyed
you
it.
for joining us. And we'll have links to the book, the audio version, and your podcast, Adrian, in the show notes and description. And thank you all for listening and watching. Bye.
Bye.